Are things getting better or worse in the world? Cogitate on that for a few seconds. Who thinks that things are getting better in the world? And who thinks they're getting worse? If you think things are getting worse, you're not alone. A 2016 poll of almost 20,000 people asked the question, do you think things are getting better or worse? In the United States, just 6% of the population said things are getting better. In Germany, 4%. In France, 3%. These are some of the luckiest people in the world to have been born into free Western societies with incredible wealth and incredible opportunity. Yet, the vast majority think that things are getting worse in the world. I'm here today to explain to you why we have this bias toward pessimism and negativity, and to give you one tool that may help you to overcome that bias. Why do we see the negative side of things? Well, if you're part of that group who thinks that things are getting worse, it's not your fault. Blame it on your amygdala. That's the part of your brain that's in touch with those primitive emotions of hate and fear. It's what drives your fight or flight response. And it's what helped your ancestors to survive in a very dangerous world. It biases your brain toward paying attention to the negative. It's what allows you to avoid those things that are life-threatening. The challenge today is that you don't face that many life-threatening events in your life, yet that part of your brain is still actively telling you to be fearful, and it overwhelms your rational ability to look at the evidence and to make a judgment that isn't couched in hate and fear and anger, those primitive emotions that allowed you and your ancestors to survive so long. That is coupled with another phenomenon, and that's something we call news. News is about events, and news is, as we know, overwhelmingly negative. News events are usually point occurrences of things that reporters report on. And what do they report about? If it bleeds, it leads. It's the negative. There's ample evidence that homicides in the U.S. are down substantially over the last 40 years. Yet you hear more and more and more about murders and other sorts of horrific events. Because we have an interest in that. Because our amygdala tells us to pay attention for those things. All of those primitive humans who ignored that died out. All of those who were hypersensitive to it passed that along to us. You have a genetic predisposition to be pessimistic. Couple that with the increased volume of news that we experience today, and it's no wonder that 94% of Americans think the world is getting worse. But that's just not true. There's ample evidence that things are getting better. So contrast those point events that are reported on, like the homicide or the conflict, with progress. Those things usually happen at a point in time that can be identified and reported on. But who reports on the progress over the past 100 years? Imagine if you consulted the news every day and you read this headline. 137,000 people were lifted out of abject poverty in the world yesterday. You could have read that headline for the past 25 years, and it would have been true. 137,000 people per day for 25 years. but nobody's printing that headline. Why? That's not news. We are objectively better off in the world today than we ever have been, and I'm going to show you some ample evidence of that fact here, and also provide you with some of my resources that support these claims. So, this is Hans Rosling. He's a Swede. He created this website, which I want you to consult, called Gapminder.com. And Hans passed recently, but his son and his wife and others are continuing his work. And Hans looked at the world 20 years ago and said, there is no third world and first world. The world's changed. Everyone's getting the news that their professors learned 20 years ago. The truth is that today, so much of the world is being lifted out of abject poverty and is moving toward middle class. Oh, but things are bad in America, right? Do you know that the upper middle class has increased from 12.9% to 29% in the last 25 years? Where did those people come from? Not from the upper class, from the lower class and the middle class. We can't look back over 25 years, or 100 years, or 200 years. 200 years ago, there was thousands of times less wealth than we have today, and it was even less well distributed than it is today. And you can find that if you consult Hans' website, Gapminder.com, or you can go to this website, humanprogress.org. And what they do is compile stories, headlines that you don't see about things that are getting better. And so I'll let you see some of those headlines today. Each one of these sites not only provides you with the information, but the data that you yourself can consult to see if you believe it or not. So to combat this bias that you have, and I have, and we all have toward pessimism, I would ask you to look around for the positive, find it, be critical, but arm yourself with some positive evidence to counterweight that negative evidence that your brain insists that you pay attention to, because the future is bright.
A slightly interesting twist of fate. Several weeks ago, I gave my research and presentation speech here, and Jack was my evaluator. So now I get the opportunity to reciprocate. See if that's good or bad of Jack. So anyway, but it was an honor today to evaluate Jack's final speech here at MPS Toastmasters, and congratulations, Jack, on everything you've done, and thank you. Jack's speech today was the researching and presenting. The purpose statement was for him to prepare a project to learn and review basic research methods and present a well-organized, well-researched speech on any topic. Bottom line up front, he met all the criteria for the speech and excelled in all the items that he was supposed to work on. It was well-researched, it was interesting, and it was organized. I have 5 things here real quick that, as Brandon calls them, sustains, things I thought you did very well, and just a couple things, room for improvement going forward. First of all, the way you introduced the speech was outstanding. You started out with a question and you involved the audience, asking us to raise our hands. This is something that, your topic is something that we have all cogitated on often, about whether things are getting better or getting worse. I'm sure everyone here has thought about that quite a bit. Right up front, you talked about the purpose of your speech. You mentioned that, hey, my purpose or your purpose today was to talk about why we have negative bias. So that really kind of primed us for the direction you were going to take us from there on out. As I already mentioned, it was very interesting. It kept my attention. I'm sure it kept everyone else's attention because it was a very relevant topic to all of us. And it was well researched. I did like how you structured it, where you, up front, you spent a minute and a half or so saying, hey, this is what the common perception is. This is what people tend to think. And then you shifted gears and, but reality is actually this. Here's some evidence to the contrary. It's a common method in research papers or even like op-ed pieces that worked well for this particular speech for you. And the last positive is your use of resources at the end. So this is one of the objectives for this speech, was to use and cite resources. And the resources you brought up at the end were interesting. I looked around the room, I saw a lot of people jotting down the web address. So only a couple things to mention, Jack, for room for improvement. The first has to do with body language and hands. You're here in front of the lectern, but you spent most of the speech right here, and your hands kind of, you would bring them up and make some gestures, but when they weren't there, they were kind of down by your side. It's a little bit awkward when there's a lectern in front of you. Perhaps you could look to use the lectern for hand placement, and also maybe move around the stage a little bit and get away from the lectern. Then the last two are related. At the end, you scrolled around the websites quite a bit, and at least for me personally, trying to follow what was going on the screen while you were talking, I lost. I was not able to follow what you were saying because I was trying to follow what was up on the screen. So a recommendation might be to take a couple screenshots of a couple key things from each website and just put them on a static slide, rather than having that dynamic movement on the stage that might be distracting to the listeners. However, overall, it was a great speech, and it was an honor for me today to evaluate you. And again, congratulations on your retirement.